Καλησπέρα και ευχαριστούμε πολύ.
Good evening and thank you very much for being here. We would like to present to you today an issue that concerns Greek bondholders that saw the life savings get a haircut in the so-called restructuring of the Greek debt, the so-called PSI, the private sector involvement, in the same way that and they were treated in the same way as banks and other financial institutions. It's obvious that in the case of natural persons bondholders, this was patently unfair because these people were not in a position to assess the investment risk or spread their investment in a way that financial institutions were able. So treating them in the same way is patently unequal because they were, as I said, natural, not legal persons. Also, financial institutions got tax credits, tax relief, as well as some relief in lieu of the damages they had because of the PSI, none of which were made available to private bondholders. So this is a great injustice as well as a choice for the Greek state, a losing choice, and it reflects very badly on the creditworthiness of the Greek state and other EU and eurozone member states, because it seems that the citizens of eurozone member states are the last resort when they lose their creditworthiness in the capital markets. So this haircut at the expense of Greek bondholders means that the Greek state is losing this last resort, and in that way it is undermining in the longer term its own interest. And it is for this reason that the proposals from the Greek finance ministry were that private persons be not included in this haircut, the so-called PSI. However, in the end, the cabinet decided, obviously under pressure from the Eurogroup, that natural persons be also included in this haircut. To my right, you have Mr. Ioannis Marinopoulos, who is the president of the Association of Private Bondholders of Greek government bonds, and we are at your disposal for any question concerning the PSI and the loss of these people's property.
Yes.
Ευχαριστώ. Είμαι από το Bloomberg και έχω μια...
Thank you. I'm from Bloomberg. I have a very short question. Since SYRIZA is now in power, why didn't you just table an amendment in the Greek parliament and solve the problem? What's the problem? Is it a technical problem, a political one? Is it both? Yes, this is obviously addressed to me. SYRIZA does have, as part of its platform, the restitution of the bondholders. However, it will not be complete, meaning that they will be paid damages, as it were, up to the amount of 100,000 euros, which is the amount up to which bank deposits are guaranteed as well, and above the 100,000 euros they will be restituted in part, and from a certain amount upwards it will be only 6% of the damages incurred. We never promised full restitution, and we are not going to do that. Besides that, going ahead with our electoral promise is something obviously that has to do with the general situation, the general fiscal situation in Greece. I hope that we do go ahead with realizing this promise, this election promise. However, we have to see whether this will be deemed a unilateral move on our part, meaning that it would be forbidden according to our most recent agreement. And we'll see what happens with that. I don't know if Mr. Marinopoulos has anything to add. First of all, I would like to thank you for coming. There's an undertaking of the Greek government, signed by the Greek government, following the Eurogroup that took the decision for the PSI. And the Greek government is committed that there will be no restitution, direct or indirect, for the private bondholders. And from what we heard later, this was because Mr. Venizelos had said in the parliament that there would be some kind of compensation. So they made him sign that no such compensation or restitution would take place. And this is the only reason I can think of for this terrible difference in treatment between natural and legal persons. Another thing, legal persons with a law before the PSI had already acknowledged that this 53% haircut that they took was part of their damages, and they were able to write this into their accounts for a period of 30 years because they got 30 years bond in exchange. And we got a totally different treatment, and it's obviously due to this agreement that they had signed. Now, I don't know if the situation will change and it will no longer be considered a unilateral action, but that's the situation right now.
Κύριε Πρόεδρε, ποιος...
I'm Karagianopoulos from Thessaloniki, the newspaper. Mr. Marinopoulos, what are you doing here in the European Parliament? What exactly do you aim with your presence here? Is that a question for me or... Yes. Well, obviously we want to make our problem known, raise awareness, and connect it with the more general effort of the Greek government in order to shake off, as it were, part of this toxic memorandum. We think that this choice in 2012 was toxic in itself. It did more harm than good. What Greece gained from this was €1 billion, but the damage was that they also cut our GDP by the same amount, so the GDP basically stayed the same. They did not gain in terms of GDP, plus they lost a huge amount of credibility, and you can see that every day. Whenever they talk whenever there's a Eurogroup meeting, we have billions of euros leaving the Greek banks. So if we want to keep on with this, money leaving the banks, we can just keep on pretending that nothing has happened and nothing is wrong. If we want things to change, and if we do not want 20 billion euros leaving the banks every time there's a Eurogroup meeting, then the European institutions can also acknowledge their mistakes and correct them, and we can move on with our lives, both Greeks and Europeans, a little bit happier. Thank you. We also have another SYRIZA MEP with us, Ms. Sofia Sakorafa. Would you like to say a couple of words? No, apparently no. My name is Petalidis from the Angelioforos newspaper in Thessaloniki. From the things you've said, I mean the representatives of private bondholders, it seems that the problem stems mainly from the Eurogroup. What makes you think that, why do you think that they're treating you like that? I mean private bondholders in particular. What's their ulterior purpose? Mr. Zolias is the vice president of the same association. Good evening. The problem you mentioned in the Eurogroup was caused by the fact that Mr. Juncker wanted Mr. Venizelos to commit that private bondholders would not be compensated. So either we will have to decide that we are all the same, we have equal rights before the law and within member states in this EU, or some of us are subservient to others. It's one or the other. So today's Greek government, made up of SYRIZA and the independent Greeks, have made an undertaking in the election period through Mrs. Valavani, who was also responsible for a committee for our issue, and Mrs. Sakorafa was also a member of that committee. They made a commitment that they are going to go ahead with an amendment, table it in Parliament, table the same amendment that they tabled 2 months ago when they were in the opposition. This, I think, is something that is a credit to SYRIZA and Mrs. Valavani, who is right now an alternate Minister of Finance, and we need to start having some commitment, and the words of politicians finally have to mean something. Ms. Valavani has to show that she stands by her words, and we believe that pretty soon this commitment will be realized and 15,000 families of private bondholders will be compensated. Let me add another thing. Right now, the European governments and peoples, to a lesser extent, they think that they are giving some money and they're in effect feeding Greeks. What they are feeding in effect is their own banks. So maybe you could say that it's a bit of both, because of course those are the debts of Greece. However, the treatment of Greek citizens was really punitive. And in my opinion they did that because they wanted to show to the Greek politicians that first of all they had to pay back the European states and then go ahead with paying back Greek bondholders. Let me come now to this toxic memorandum. If you have this sick cow, you cannot just beat it into producing more milk. You have to heal the cow, and when it's healthy, you'll get your milk back. You'll get more milk in the end. So if you keep destroying everything, destroying confidence in the economy, every time there's a Eurogroup meeting you have 20 billion euros leaving the banks. I mean, this is counterproductive, and the Greek politicians should explain this to the European ones so that in the end they will understand that you have to move away from this logic of the carrot and the stick. This was really terrorism that was imposed on Greek citizens. I'm not saying that Greeks should not bear this burden, paying back the loans that they had taken out. However, this is destructive of the trust in the system. Dear Chairman, a couple of days ago there was a new agreement of the Greek government with our lenders. Are you mentioned in that agreement? That's one question. And another question is, could this issue be legal and not political? Answer: I don't think we're included in that agreement, and I don't know if we should be included in it. We should be included in the agreement that will come 4 months from now. I haven't spoken to the minister, and I don't know if he intended to do it now or if he's going to do it in 4 months. However, we have this commitment from the alternate Minister of Finance, and we're going to hold her to that. What was the other question? Have you made any legal steps? Yes, Mr. Chrysogonos can also say a few words of that. We are right now at the European Court of Human Rights, and the ECHR has called upon the Greek government to submit their proposals until May if they intend to come to an amicable arrangement. So I think that there's an opportunity now for the Greek government to show an amicable face, and in that way I think that trust will be regained both in Greece and in Europe. So through this process the Greek government could maybe submit this amendment to the ECHR and maybe get an answer as to whether this is a reasonable way to compensate those people. However, we're also in the courts in Greece against the banks for selling those bonds to us, and European citizens, Austrians and Germans, have won in court because certain banks sold them Greek bonds as totally secure products. And the same thing happened in Greece. The bank sold them to us as low-risk investment. So maybe we can use those decisions in the Greek courts as well. So we're now in a process in the Greek courts as well as in the ECHR, and we're waiting for that. However, my opinion is that where there's a will, there's a way. So, because those amounts that are claimed from Greek and European citizens in general are really low, we're really not seeing the greater picture here. The greater picture is the fact that Greece needs to regain trust in order to attract investment, as well as stopping money leaving the banks. Every day they're in talks with the Europeans. Let me add another thing to what Mr. Marinopoulos said. I cannot imagine this government, the government of SYRIZA and ANEL, where because those two parties for the past 2.5 years were talking about the great swindle at our expense. So I cannot imagine them treating us differently right now that they're in government. I think that in the end we'll have a decision, an amendment, I mean, in the Parliament that will be just for everyone, for us, and as well for SYRIZA and ANEL, meaning that they will stand by their word. I mean, if we're to have a Europe where we're all equal before the law, we have to do that. I mean, it's not... We cannot just have the same obligations and not the same rights. If we are to be equal before the law, we have to have the same rights concerning the rights concerning property as safeguarded in our constitution as well as the treaties of the European Union. This was a crime at the expense of 15,000 families, and we still haven't gotten an answer for everyone. I'm Alexopoulos Dimitris, also Vice President of the same association. Another thing, during this PSI we got back bonds that we got exchange worth 30% of the original value, and those bonds are going to expire between 2023 and 44. So you realize that this is not realistic for a natural person. So we were included in the same package solution that was given for the financial institutions. And I mean, those time frames are unrealistic for a natural person. So this is why we insist that this is a political issue and not so much a legal one, and that the Greek government has to do something about it.
Υπάρχει άλλη ερώτηση?
Any other questions?
I'm from SFR newspaper. I would like to ask each of you how much you lost personally in this day. Yes. And the second question is, I will use the same example. You spoke about the cow. As the eurozone is still feeding this cow and needs this milk, so you are saying that the eurozone is still the same, or the only problem for, or the only source of problems that you are facing now, or still facing now?
I personally lost 100,000 euros, so that's my number, which is actually my family's savings. Right. As to the source of evil, we can argue quite extensively on what the source of evil is. That's okay. My argument is that if you have faith in the system, everybody's gaining from that. And if you destroy the faith, everybody's losing from that. So why spoil the credibility of the system for 1 billion when you have the choice to fix it? And this is a very simple argument. As to the fact that the European Union is, or the member states or whatever, is feeding the cow, there's no doubt about that. But then arguing, that instead of giving the money to Greece, they would give it to their taxpayers or to their people, you can counter-argue that they would have to give it to their banks. So in reality, I mean, because sometime, every time, someone has to take the loss, right? So the hole has to be plugged in some way or another. And the best way to fill the hole is to actually increase the pie, to increase the credibility, and to increase whatever is gaining from that, not to destroy it.
Να συμπληρώσω λίγο κι εγώ.
Let me add another thing about the role of Europe. Europe, for us Greeks, was something different due to the fact that it was organized, there was social welfare, and we always thought that Europe would stand on the side of the citizens. And then suddenly one night we heard that Mr. Venizelos committed to Mr. Juncker that we would not be compensated. So what we saw from Europe was come into our country and really define what we were going to do. So if Europe keeps on this track, its future will not be that good. My name is Komnenos Strongilis from Syrus in Vienna. My question is, if there's a political will on the Greek government side to compensate those people, do you think that the EU and any part of that institutional mechanism will stand in the way, or will this or another Greek government be in a position to compensate those people without the EU standing in the way? The answer? Well, you're going to have to ask the European Council and the European Commission for that. I'm just an MEP. The gentlemen here are representatives of the bondholders. I would like to think that the European institutions will not have a problem with any decision by the Greek government. However, from what we've heard publicly, I realize that this was done on purpose in order to downgrade the creditworthiness of the Greek state, so that the Greek state would be totally dependent on the other member states of the eurozone in order to find any funds. Mr. Chrysogonos, you are also an eminent lawyer. do you think, as a lawyer, that those people will do they have a case in court? Article 1 of the first additional protocol of the European Convention of Human Rights safeguards the right to property. So I think that this right has trampled upon in the case of natural persons. So I think that the European Court of Human Rights should judge in favor of the private bondholders. Let me say another thing. There's a paradox, let me be kind. There's a paradox in this decision of the Greek Council of State, and it's just a couple of phrases. And in the first one, they say that it was correct that natural persons were not treated differently than banks, because they all had to be treated pari passu. And then in the next phrase it says, well, in any case, it's also a good thing that we gave tax credits to the bank, because the financial institutions, as we all know, are weak right now. So the banks are weak and have to be protected, but if a bondholder had, I don't know, cancer and was sick and lost his life savings, he was not weak and he was not to be protected. So yeah, that's for you to judge, and it reflects upon the judges basically that took this decision. So if you have no other questions, thank you very much for being here. And that's it from us. Thank you very much.